Rhett Lashlee said that he expects SMU to win a national championship in the near future, but he also doesn't know if he's going to be around for it. Huh?
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Locked On SMU, part of the Locked On Podcast Network that brings you things about your team every single day. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, and thank you for spending half an hour or so of your day with me. I'm Grayson Singleton. We're going to get to that in just a second, but coming up on today's show as well, does SMU's program now have the it factor or the brand that a lot of the marquee programs in college football have? We'll talk about that. We're also going to update on another five-star recruit. Yesterday, we talked about four-star quarterback Malachi Ziegler. Today, we will talk about 2027 number one overall prospect, Kennedy Brown, the left tackle from the Houston, Texas area. We're going to break all that down later on to end the show. So stick with us for that. Glad you're with us today. Here we go. So Rhett Lashlee, also on his appearance on the Paul Finebaum show that occurred yesterday afternoon, we talked about the meat of that conversation in yesterday's episode. So go back and listen or watch that episode, and you'll find out what I think about that. But Rhett Lashlee also said something pretty interesting on the Paul Finebaum show. Quote, "We've just got a lot of momentum, a lot of positive alignment in our program. And I know this. I know it's a matter of when, not if, we can and will win a national championship again at SMU." Okay, pause right there, because there's one more sentence in the quote that I'll get to in a minute. Pause right there, because I do think there is merit to Rhett Lashlee saying that we expect that we will win a national championship in the near future. I 100% believe that they can win a national championship in the near future with the level of recruiting they're doing, with the level of performance on the field that they showed in year one of a Power Four conference, with the fact that they're in a Power Four conference and have performed well in that conference thus far. And remember, I know people look at the national championship bubble a little differently than we look at, say, the Super Bowl bubble, but I think those two are starting to mirror each other more, because to me, once you're in the final tournament, you are a national championship contender. Period, point blank, end of story. Whether it's the final 12 or ultimately becomes the final 16, you are in the national championship picture, because what do tournaments tell us all the time, especially once you get down to that 16 number? Anything can happen on any given day, right? And because of the unpredictability of college football, and there is certainly a lot of it, if you get there, you are in the picture 100%. So there is merit to what Rhett Lashlee said as it pertains to SMU's expectations to bring home a natty to DFW. Here's the interesting part of this that I want to get to, and I'm glad he made this point, because this is going to get fun. I don't know if we'll do it while I'm blessed to be here or not, but we can do that here, and that's what excites me about SMU. Okay, now before any of you start freaking out, no, I have no inside knowledge of Rhett Lashlee leaving SMU. I don't think Rhett Lashlee expects to leave SMU, and I just there's nothing happening there, is what I'm trying to say. He's not hinting towards something. He's not being cryptic toward anything. But I do think it's interesting, because I went on the Locked On ACC podcast, and I'll play a clip of that for you here in just a second. I went on the Locked On ACC podcast, and I was presented with that question. Do you think Rhett Lashlee is long for SMU? Because in the world of college football and college athletics, you succeed at a program that was smaller, and there are certainly programs that are much larger than SMU. That is when those staffs start to get picked off and go elsewhere. Look at Temple to Baylor for Matt Rule. I think that is one of the first couple of exhibits and examples of the last 10 years or so. Temple looks really good. Baylor comes calling. Matt Rule parlays that into an NFL job. Didn't really go well with the Carolina Panthers, but ends up back in Nebraska. Okay, these are the sorts of things that happen in the college world. So it is fair to wonder, well, how long is Rhett Lashlee going to be here before somebody ends up firing a coach and gives Rhett Lashlee a holler. And here's what I had to say on Locked On ACC last week concerning that particular point. But I think this one change in college football works in SMU's favor. The fact that you now have to pay $15, $20 million for a roster kind of handicaps you when it comes to paying buyouts for these coaches. So I think we're going to be seeing less big ticket coaches fired because it's going to be so much more financially difficult to do so. That could work in SMU's favor in terms of keeping Lashlee, because you're not going to have another school that's at least as many schools that are going to be paying a buyout and then have to give Rhett Lashlee an exponential raise to leave Dallas. Jimbo Fisher was fired by Texas A&M back in 2023, and A&M paid a record buyout and is still paying out the buyout of $75 million. That is no longer feasible because of the money that you have to pay for a roster. You got to pay $20 million for a roster. You think if Texas, with their $22, $25 million roster, underachieves 2 years in a row, they are going to easily be able to cut a check to Steve Sarkisian and buy him out? No, because they still got to pay for more players to get better. And then on top of that, you could potentially have to pay the buyout to get the coach out of town where he currently is. So I think Jimbo Fisher here, yes, his whole thing serves as a warning to anybody who wants to sign somebody to a 10-year contract, but also some of these guys are going to be stuck. Some of these schools are going to be stuck with some of these guys that they otherwise would want to get rid of if they commit so many dollars to the roster. And you have to commit that many dollars to the roster if you want to be competitive. Texas Tech has the second most expensive roster projected for 2025 behind Texas. If they underachieve this year, and if they underachieve next year, it's not going to be easy to get out of Joey McGuire's contract. It just will not be. So the fact that it is going to be harder and harder to fire coaches, particularly fire them early in contracts, like what A&M's situation was when they cut ways with Jimbo Fisher, that bodes well for Rhett Lashlee, because that's less people in a given cycle that are going to be hollering for Rhett Lashlee to give him an interview or to come coach their football team. And I think that even though that's your SMU, and you do wonder, well, if we continue this level of sustained success, will this dude get calls from elsewhere? And the answer is, I don't know. Because look at the programs right now whose coaches may be on the hot seat. Auburn and Hugh Freeze, that might be one you have to watch out for obvious reasons. SEC job. Also, Rhett Lashlee was a player at Arkansas. Rhett Lashlee did play at Arkansas, and Sam Pittman is a lot of people's first choice to be fired, of coaches to be fired in the SEC. But outside of those, another big ticket coach on the hot seat is Lincoln Riley. Have you seen what's going on with USC's money problems? That program has been irresponsibly spending to the point where they are in some deep debt right now. And I don't know how their recruiting class in 2026 is going to hold together, but there's a lot of money being promised and being thrown around that I'm not sure USC actually has. You think it's going to be a simple, hey, we'll write a check and get rid of Lincoln Riley if we go 7-6 again? I don't think so. So this era of paying $15, $20, $25 million for a roster probably inhibits the coaching carousel to some degree. Now, does that mean that coaches get an extra level of job security because, well, they just can't fire you? I think that's a pretty bad way to look at things if you are a coach. But nonetheless, it does work out for SMU that it's going to be harder to part ways with coaches, and the buyouts are going to be harder to just pony up and cut the check for. That bodes well for SMU because that's less people trying to go after your coach, and it means you can more easily and probably longer keep your coach who believes he can win a natty with this particular team. Coming up next, keeping it on the subject of Coach Lashlee, is he building an it factor and making the Ponies a brand that it once was back in the 80s? We'll talk about that on the other side. Keep it here on Locked On SMU. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink minus the alcohol into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just trying to make memories with your friends, there's a hole-in-one for your energy game. So let's be honest, some days on the course or off of it, you just need that energy boost to stay sharp and stay energized. You think of the weirdest course you've ever played golf on. I've got one in mind, but it always has some kind of odd challenge that just throws off your game. And if you're not mentally all the way there, you could end up with a crazy hole that tanks your round. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. So if you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This promotion is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. So whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. Back here on Locked On SMU, I'm Grayson Singleton. Thank you so much for watching us and making us your first listen of the day. And since you made it this far, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that bell as well, so you can be notified whenever we release new episodes. And be sure to check out the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. So does SMU have the it factor now? And it's a term we use a lot in sports. And I came up with this because I read one sentence, the opening sentence of an article from Rivals' Kevin Longquist. Here's the opening line. That is the only thing I read in this article. They call it the it factor. In sports, the designation funnels to players and coaches. Talent, ability, coming up when it matters, and aura are among the ingredients. I want to focus on that word, and I hate this word because of what people of my age and generation have done with it. But I want to talk about aura for a second. And we're not going to get into the Gen Z meaning of, what is having aura? But I do think having a mystique and having an atmosphere and a tangible trait around you is a necessity in college football today. Because we live in an era where the people that get ahead have what? All of them have one thing in common: a brand. If you think of Oklahoma, Oklahoma's got a tradition. Oklahoma's a school that leans heavily on tradition. Alabama, in recent years, Alabama was known for what? Its brand was, we do our job and we are the most buttoned up team. And a lot of times the most physical too. Clemson hangs its hat heavily on physicality. LSU, I don't know what their brand is, but they've got one. They've got, and maybe I think it's swag. LSU's brand is straight up swag. But the successful programs now and the successful people in life, especially on an independent basis and on a content creation basis like this, all have a tangible brand that you can point to and say, that is them. Now, why do I bring this up as it pertains to SMU? And more importantly, why do I bring this up today on July 30th? Because I think Rhett Lashlee, with all of the things that we've discussed over the last week or so, is starting to build at least a brand for himself and at most a brand for the school. When I hear him say stuff like, I'm going to politic for the ACC, and that obviously permeates down to politicking for his school, when he goes out and says things that, even though it got lost in translation, his actual message, but when he goes out and says things like the SEC doesn't have depth, you know what you're building your brand as? You're building a brand. You're building a brand of, I am going to say what's on my mind, and I'm going to go to bat for people. And if you want to condense it into one word, I would use the word boldness. I think SMU is going to build itself as a program, one that is bold. They're not going to be scared of nobody. They're not going to back down to nobody. They're going to respect people, but they're not going to think you're better than them. And that's what I get from Rhett Lashlee here. Now, again, this is entirely my opinion. I haven't spoken to Rhett Lashlee. I have no idea what he wants to convey to the masses every time he speaks. But if I just dissect everything that I've heard from this guy and the way that he talks and the conviction with which he says everything, it's a calm conviction too. You ever notice that? Rhett Lashlee doesn't get worked up. There's a lot of people in this world that could take a lesson from that. He says things with calm conviction, never rattled. So he displays stability, but he is also a bold dude. And when you see that, because he's been going toe-to-toe with everybody. He went on Paul Feinbaum's show. Keep this in mind. Keep this in mind about Paul Feinbaum. Paul Feinbaum is historically susceptible to being unhinged. And a lot of his brand, there goes that word again, has to do with Paul Feinbaum's unhinged rant. And Paul Feinbaum came at Lashlee and said, your program is the most corrupt in college football history. Rhett Lashlee goes on Paul Feinbaum's show and says, yeah, no, I mean to diss the SEC. I'm trying to do the best for my conference and my school. To me, that's a hell of an ambassador. Oklahoma State, my alma mater, is defined by the I'm a man, I'm 40, right? That's the memorable quote amongst everybody. Everybody in the country. You think of Oklahoma State, top 5 thing that's going to come to mind is the I'm a man, I'm 40 rant from Mike Gundy. What's going to come to mind with SMU, as long as Rhett Lashlee is the head man, is that that's a coach that he will talk his you-know-what. He will say what's on his mind, and ultimately it will all be for the betterment of the people he represents. And I think that permeates down to your players, because if your coach ain't scared to say something like that, you think those players are going to be timid and scared when they go into Death Valley to take on Clemson, the presumed ACC champions this year? I don't think so. You think those players are going to be shell-shocked the first time they play Miami, even though that game is in Dallas? No, they're not. Miami, another school that's got a brand. But everybody these days, the influential people in the world that are below the age of 50, they have a brand. They have something that you can associate with them. The programs that get ahead in college football, they have something that you can associate with them. And I think SMU's in position to build that. And it doesn't really matter as much for the guys on the team in terms of Rhett Lashlee's opening quote, which he says, I believe we're going to win a natty. We talked about that in the first segment. Who it matters to are the guys you're trying to attract. And you can attract a lot of dudes if you have a brand and something to hang your hat on. We're going to be out there. We're going to be bold. We're going to attacker's mindset. And before then, we're just going to go to work. We're going to go to work, but we're going to have a belief here that once we finish putting in the work, we are inferior to no one. And that's really attractive to high school players coming out of the portal. When you're trying to make additions to your team, that's a really, really good sell for the Mustangs. And every passing day, I kind of like this Rhett Lashlee cat more and more and more. One more segment to go. We're going to go back to the high school ranks in recruiting, because the number 1 overall prospect in the 2027 class has SMU trending at the top of his attention. We'll talk about it next to close up shop here on Locked On SMU. Finishing up on a Wednesday here on Locked On SMU. Thank you for sticking with us. Here we go. Kennedy Brown is the subject of our recruiting talk today. Kennedy Brown is the number 1 prospect in the entire country in the 2027 class. From the Houston, Texas area, goes to Kingwood High School. Rivals has him as a 5-star. 24/7 just wants to be a contrarian and have him as a 4-star. ESPN has him as a 5-star as well. Some of the schools trending atop of his recruitment: Texas A&M is there, Alabama's there, Oregon, USC, SMU. But Sam Spiegelman, who does one of the more excellent jobs covering recruiting for rivals, he got to catch up with Kennedy Brown. And here's what Brown had to say about SMU. Quote, "I talked with Coach Justice quite a bit." That's Garin Justice, offensive line coach. "Coach Lashlee and Coach Justice came to my school, and I love them. They've been calling consistently, and they'll call me every week or so. I love the environment up there. I enjoyed it, and it wasn't even a full stadium. They were still building one of those end zones. Football-wise, the coaches send me videos of them coaching so I can see what it's like, and I would fit in great there. From asking the players and what I've seen, Coach Justice is right up there." Now, he came to Dallas for a visit in the Pitt game last fall. But ever since June 15th, this is in the article from Spiegelman, SMU calls him weekly. And they're trending up along the top, along with Oregon, Texas, Texas A&M, Clemson, Georgia, and Penn State. So those are the teams that are trending at the top of Kennedy Brown's list as he goes into his junior year. Kennedy Brown is, and will be by the time he gets to college, a college-made player. Right now, he stands at 6'3.5", 285. Playing left tackle. Light on his feet, good hands. He's one of those guys that just seems like he knows how to play football. When I watch him, there's guys like Michael Pasusi that came off the board to Oklahoma in the 2025 class, 5-star from Lewisville, Texas. There's guys that just know how to play football, that you don't have to teach how to play football, right? And I think Kennedy Brown, fits that bill. But also, let's project forward. Let's say SMU gets him, and SMU's got an uphill climb to do so. They've got to fight off a lot of people. They're going to have to figure out how much money they want to offer Kennedy Brown, because you're going up against people that can offer Kennedy Brown some serious coin. Texas and Oregon are in there. That's nothing to sneeze at when it comes to their non-shyness of opening up the coffers for anybody. Texas has done so 3 times. They did so 3 times in a span of 5 days for 3 different players. Texas will spend money. Oregon's got the Phil Knight money. But Evan, I almost called him Evan Bauxite because that's where in Arkansas he's from. So forgive me on that one. But you're poised to sign a left tackle this year in the 2026 class. Evan Goodwin from Bauxite, Arkansas is who I'm referring to. 4-star, the number 2 player out of the state of Arkansas, by the way. If you were to get him in the 2026 class, along with Drew Evers, by the way, the interior offensive lineman from Flower Mound, who's also who also is a 4-star, and then you are able to land Kennedy Brown, which again, long way off. You have built yourself an exciting offensive line for, let's just call it 2028. That's a really good offensive line between Goodwin, Evers, and hypothetically Brown. And we're allowed to dream forward, right? And see where guys are going to fit. That would be a star. That would probably be the most star-studded offensive line the Mustangs have ever fielded since the 80s. And you look at what they have in the 2025 class, guys who are going to be true freshmen this year, a 4-star in Jermod Odoms, who 24/7 Sports, who just always has to be a contrarian. I love 24/7, by the way. I'm making jokes. Everybody has him as a 4-star. 24/7 has him as a 5-star. Number 13 player out of the state of Texas in the 2025 class. I think he's going to be a really good player. He might be their next great tackle. So they have done well on the offensive line. But the reason I put this segment last, after what we talked about in segments 1 and 2, is that this sort of brand building thing for the future is where you're looking. Because you're going to have to knock off some heavy hitters to land dudes, and they have knocked off heavy hitters to land dudes. We've talked ad nauseum about Drew Evers and how he chose SMU over Oklahoma, the reigning defending national champion, Ohio State, a Penn State team that ended SMU's season pretty emphatically last year. Aldra Miles chose you over some heavy hitters as well. Zach Turner chose you over heavy hitters. So they're doing the right things, but you have to continue to build yourself a brand. And your coach has to continue to go out there and show high school kids, yeah, you want to be coached by me. This is where the race for Kennedy Brown, that's where that's going to come into play. And that's what could keep you in it and ultimately kick you over the top. Would I project SMU to get him at this moment? No. And there's also no sense in projecting who's going to get him right now because he's a 2027 kid. And there are going to be 2027 kids that will announce commitments during their junior year. That will happen. Will Kennedy Brown? I have no idea. But to me, I just don't think it's fruitful to offer a prediction just yet. But that's one to keep an eye on, and it's one that SMU is trending around the top, in the top group for him, the number one player in the 2027 class. And wouldn't that be exciting to culminate the rebirth if you land the top player in a particular class? Oh boy, that would be something to celebrate on the hilltop. All right, that'll do it for today's edition of Locked On SMU, part of the Locked On Podcast family. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Remember to check out the portal for your next listen. Locked On's the portal with Brian Smith. Gives you all the information on college football and the world and the changing landscape of the sport. I'm Grayson Singleton. We will talk to you tomorrow. Take it easy, everybody.